Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into something colder, much colder. A year so bleak, so sunless, so universally miserable that even medieval peasants would have called it overkill. We're talking about 536 AD, the year the sun disappeared, crops failed, and the world briefly forgot how to be alive without shivering. Spoiler alert, you wouldn't last till lunchtime. Before we freeze to death together, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if your fingers haven't gone numb yet. And drop a comment telling me what time it is, where you are, and whether your room is warmer than 536 AD. Odds are, it is. Now, dim the lights. Maybe pull your blanket up to your ears, and turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Let's slip back into the coldest, darkest year in history and see how long you'd survive. Congratulations, you've just woken up in the year 536 AD, widely considered by historians to be the worst year to be alive. Not because of war, not because of plague, but because the sun stopped showing up to work. The good news? You're not dead. Yet. The bad news? You're you. In 536, wearing a tunic made of regret and frostbite. There's no fanfare, no trumpets, no divine welcome committee, just your bare feet, a freezing floor, and an overwhelming sense that this was a mistake. Your new name? You don't get one. Not because it's a mystery, but because names here are more like vague rumours passed down in the absence of literacy. If you're lucky, someone calls you that one, or boy, or the one with the cough. Let's be clear, you're not royalty, not a merchant, not even a respected villager. You're barely a person in the eyes of your community. Your job is to exist as quietly and usefully as possible, and ideally not die in a way that smells too much. Your age, around 20, which is a polite way of saying you're already halfway to the grave. You've never seen a mirror, but that's fine. Your reflection would mostly scream back anyway. Your skin is dry, pale, chapped like old bark, and your hair resembles a poorly handled scarecrow after a lightning strike. You smell like meat that's been left near a fire, but not actually cooked. The scent is instructional. You wake up slowly, not because you're rested, but because waking and sleeping are no longer distinguishable states. You drift in and out of shallow, dreamless half-consciousness, interrupted only by shivering and the occasional coughing fit from the person beside you. Not that you know who that is. It could be your mother, it could be a sheep, it could be a stranger who crawled in last night for warmth and silently died sometime around dawn. The sun should be rising, but it isn't. It hasn't, properly, for months. Outside, the sky is a thick, metallic grey, a permanent ash-smudged ceiling that smothers light before it ever touches the earth. It's not night, not exactly, but it's not morning either. It's a kind of murky twilight that lingers like a bad decision. You can't tell time anymore. The days bleed together like overcooked porridge. Colourless, tasteless, endless. There's a fire pit in the centre of the room, but it's out. Again. Fuel is hard to come by these days. Forests are mostly bare. You've already burned half your roof, and a collection of furniture that wasn't really yours. Your fingers are too numb to feel much, so you clutch your tunic closer. A threadbare woolen sack that might have been brown at some point, but now seems permanently stained with soot, oil, and what you hope is old soup. You try to stand. Your knees disagree. Your body is stiff, underfed, and aching from sleep that takes more than it gives. Every joint clicks like poorly made clockwork. You've been sleeping on a pallet of straw, if you can call it that. More sticks than cushion. There's something dead in it. You stopped checking a while ago. probably a rat. Possibly your uncle. Welcome to your identity in 536 AD. You're not important. You're not comfortable. You're not safe. Your worldview is a tight circle. Your home, the cold field outside, the church you occasionally crawl into to beg the sky for warmth. Your vocabulary consists of maybe 200 words, half of which are variants of cold, hungry, and why. Reading, you don't even know what letters are. Stories are oral, and history is something the old man in the corner mutters about when his frost-bitten foot is hurting. Your hopes? Limited. You'd like to eat something that didn't die a week ago. Maybe own a second piece of clothing. Possibly not freeze to death by the end of this sentence. Ambition is a dangerous luxury. People who dream too much are either burned as heretics or simply disappear during the next storm. Your status in the world? Technically free, practically expendable. You're part of what will eventually become Europe, but for now it's just a post-Roman wilderness of scattered villages, failing fields, and the kind of superstition that makes people tie strings to trees and hope for divine mercy. Civilization has taken a sabbatical. You are one generation removed from the collapse of the Western Roman Empire, and all that structure, language, and infrastructure has crumbled into moss-covered rubble. There are roads, but they lead to nowhere. There are cities, but they've mostly emptied out or fallen into silence. The world is quieter now, like it's holding its breath. And still, you breathe. Unlucky you. You shuffle outside your hovel. The air stings like broken glass. The ground crunches under your feet. Frozen dirt, bones, bits of old tools. The village is silent. No one speaks in the mornings. There's nothing to say, and speech burns energy. Every word is a luxury. Every conversation is a calculated risk against survival. Someone walks past you, face wrapped in old cloth, holding a stick with a pointy rock tied to the end. You nod. They don't. No one greets each other anymore. Smiling is rare. It wastes warmth. You exist, not with pride or purpose, but in the way mould exists. Quietly, persistently, slightly damp. And still that grey sky glares down at you. Not quite light, not quite dark. Just a steady, unblinking absence of mercy. Let's talk about your body, or what's left of it. You're not healthy. That's not a concern here. Health is a concept for people who can afford it. You, on the other hand, are just surviving in a husk that occasionally twitches. Your arms are thin, not because you're delicate, but because food ran out 2 weeks ago, and nobody has mentioned it because it's easier to pretend meals are optional now. Your ribs show, but no one compliments them. Fashion hasn't been invented. Neither has shame. The only thing people see when they look at you is whether or not you're contagious. Your face is always red from wind and cracked from cold. You have sores on your mouth you stop naming. Your lips bleed when you smile, so you don't. Your nose runs endlessly, a constant leak that no one wipes, because there are no handkerchiefs, no tissues, and no point. You're damp. Always. Not from bathing, but from being exposed to a climate that's decided it's tired of sporting mammals. Your breath stinks, but that's communal now. Every person smells like they've been pickled in desperation and smoked over mildew. If someone ever described a scent from this year, it would be something like fermented wool and panic. You don't know what your voice sounds like in a warm room. You've never heard yourself speak without your teeth chattering. You mumble when necessary, grunt when possible, and mostly just breathe loudly through clenched teeth, while hoping today isn't the one where your chest tightness becomes a final condition. Let's move to the concept of family. If you have one, they are statistically disappointing. Your mother died of something no one could identify because there are no terms for illnesses beyond bad breath, fever, and demon sick. Your father might be around, or he might have wandered off into the woods to become part of a tree. People do that now. They walk out into the fog and don't come back. No one searches. It's not a rescue mission. It's an offering. You might have a sibling. If so, they're probably fighting you for food, or for warmth, or for the last rat you found behind the storage basket. Love is a complicated emotion when calories are involved. You stopped calling each other names. Now you just nod and share silence like it's the only thing left to inherit. The people around you aren't a community. They're co-survivors. You share proximity, not connection. Every face in your village is drawn in the same palette. Grey, thin, shadowed by hooded brows, and slightly suspicious. You know their footsteps, but not their stories. You all pretend this is normal, because saying otherwise would require energy, or hope, or breath warm enough not to fog mid-sentence. In terms of status, you are not a slave, but only because no one's interested in owning someone this inconvenient. You're a peasant, yes, but that doesn't even begin to capture the depth of your insignificance. You're not poor in a way that can be fixed. You're poor in the way abandoned animals are poor, born behind the barn, forgotten unless you make noise, and only kept alive because your death would create smell. You are not educated. You don't even know what education is. Books are things priests mention when they want you to feel guilty about something, and you assume the written word is mostly spells or curses. If someone handed you a page, you'd probably try to wrap a wound with it, or eat it, or burn it for warmth. Not that paper exists. What does exist are ideas, passed down through murmurs and fever dreams. Wisdom here is a bundle of guesses said in a confident tone by someone who hasn't died yet. Your language is simple. Grunts, moans, curse words, and warnings. Most of your sentences involve food, God, or frostbite. Jokes exist, but they're never funny. Laughter is more of a wheeze, usually followed by a coughing fit and someone spitting blood into the dirt. You're a mammal, technically, but you live like moss, clinging to damp surfaces, feeding on what drips from above, and hoping to go unnoticed by larger things with sharper teeth. And about that larger thing, the world. It's not the globe, you know. There are no borders, no nations, just blurred territories and roving hazards. The Roman Empire used to be a structure, something that held all of this together with roads and law and logic. But Rome collapsed like a drunk falling downstairs, and when it fell, everything went with it. The plumbing, the trade routes, the architecture, the calendar, the illusion of meaning. Now, what's left is ash and silence. And what the sun didn't take with it, the sky is finishing off. The year is not just dark, it is cursed dark. The kind of dark that seeps into your bones, your thoughts, your breath. Some say it's punishment from God. Others blame volcanoes, or devils, or omens written in the guts of birds. You don't question anymore. You simply live with the knowledge that the sun is gone, and it might not be back. That's the only constant. The cold, the dark, the waiting. And still you rise every morning, or what passes for morning, not because you're hopeful, but because lying down too long makes you stiffen like wood, and the last person who stayed still too long had to be buried with a stick. No one asked why. No one had the strength. Let's not pretend you have goals. You don't dream. You don't plan. You react. Every moment is a calculation between effort and pain. Can I walk to the river for water? Can I chew this bark long enough to imagine it's food? Can I stretch my foot without snapping a toe off? Even your prayers are smaller now. You don't ask for warmth. You ask to feel your hands. You don't ask for food. You ask not to hallucinate again. You don't ask for life. You ask for less death. You are part of a forgotten chapter in a forgotten century. No one is writing about you. No one is recording this. Your life is a whisper in the fog, a misplaced cough in the middle of a collapsed world. And if somehow someone does remember this time, they will do so with a shiver. A small footnote in a thick book. The year 536, the year the sun disappeared. And they will say, it was the worst time to be alive. They will be right. You aren't unique. You're barely distinct. In this year, in the endless twilight of ash, you're just another silhouette moving through the smoke. There are no portraits of you. No lineage, no surname, no family crest. Just mud-covered feet, a hollow stomach, and a name that may or may not be passed down, depending on whether your mouth works long enough to say it. Your birth wasn't recorded. It was mumbled over a midwife's shoulder while she tried to find something sharp to cut the cord. There was no feast, no song. Just the usual prayer that you wouldn't die by the next snow. You almost did. Everyone almost does. Survival isn't a triumph here. It's a coin flip you keep losing in slow motion. When people refer to you, they use whatever comes to mind first. Him. That one. The one with the limp. Frost lips. No one uses your name unless they're angry, or unless you've just been found unconscious behind the pig shed again. No one spells your name because no one can spell. Your identity is not a story. It's a collection of guesses smeared in mud and wrapped in a wool shroud. You don't know where you are on a map because maps don't exist. Geography is described in shapes of hills and memory scars. Go until you see the tree that looks like a broken finger, then turn left at the rock that weeps. That's your navigation system. You don't know what year it is either. The concept of 536 AD is something only scribes in distant monasteries will whisper to each other decades later, when they try to make sense of what happened, why the sky changed, why crops failed, why people began to fear the morning. For you, it's just this year. This long, grey, endless year. There are no calendars here, only seasons. And this one has no end. Every day feels like November got drunk, fell asleep in March, and forgot to leave. Snow comes too early and stays too late. Crops try to grow, then freeze mid-breath. Animals vanish. You used to hear birds in the morning. You think. Now there's just wind. A deep, angry wind that slides under your door and through your bones like it's looking for something to punish. No one explains things to you. Not because they're secret, but because there are no explanations. The sky dimmed, the air changed, and people just accepted it like a dying candle in a room full of debt. Some say it was a volcano. Not that you know what that is. Some say it was gods. Others say it was the gods, plural, fighting in the sky. One man claimed it was a giant wolf slowly eating the sun. You didn't question him. He had a knife and a dead stare. You stopped asking questions a while ago. The answers were always the same. Work harder, pray more, or don't think about it. So you don't. You move your body, even when it resists, and you let your mind rot in peace. Emotionally, you've flattened. You're not sad, you're not angry. You're weathered, like stone that used to have edges but was eventually worn smooth by wind and time, and being urinated on by goats. You don't react when someone screams. You don't flinch when the roof leaks. You don't cry when the food runs out. You just wait. That's your skill now. You're a professional waiter. Not in the restaurant sense. Those don't exist. But in the existential one. You wait for weather to pass. For crops to grow. For someone to say it's over. No one ever does. Sometimes you remember colours. Bright ones. Green fields. Blue skies. A red berry that wasn't mouldy. It's hard to tell if those are memories or dreams, though. Everything real now is grey or brown or sickly yellow. Even people. Especially people. You dream, but your dreams are confused. They're not wishes. They're echoes. Disconnected images of warmth or laughter or the concept of soup. You wake up each time with your hands clawed around your chest, trying to hold in the part of you that keeps wanting out. The language of your inner thoughts has changed, too. You no longer think in words like tomorrow or later. You think in chunks of experience. Not hungry now. Fire is out. He died. Where did I leave the bone? Your inner monologue is a checklist for not collapsing, and yet you hold on. Not because life is precious, but because death is louder. It calls in the night, in the growl of your stomach, in the wheeze of your neighbour's breath. Dying is always nearby. It watches you with the same indifference as a butcher watching soup boil. You've seen people die standing up. That's a thing now. People freeze in place, leaning on tools, staring into the fog. You find them in the morning, stiff and quiet. No one screams. No one prays. You just pull them into the forest and hope something eats them before the smell sets in. You once saw a baby born in a hut 2 doors down. It cried for half a day, then it didn't. The mother didn't speak after that. Just kept rocking and rocking and rocking until her spine bent like a question mark, and no one asked why. Life begins quiet now, and ends quieter. There is no legacy. There are no last words. There are no moments of clarity where someone looks into the sky and sees peace. There's just this, a long, slow burn through time's least hospitable hallway. You're not a person here. You're kindling. And the world is still trying to light you. And somehow, through all of this, the identity loss, the bone-chilling sky, the vanishing warmth, you keep going. Not bravely, not poetically, just stubbornly? Like frost creeping back after a fire. Like mould returning after a scrub. You persist, because what else is there to do? You're not the hero of this world. There are no heroes. Only those who manage not to collapse face first into the mud before dinner. If dinner happens. If there's anything left to cook. If there's still a fire. If you still remember how. This is who you are in 536. A whisper. A shiver. A name nobody writes down. Someone who woke up in the worst year in history and might live just long enough to regret it. The first thing you notice when you step outside, if you ever built the courage to leave your hovel, is that the world has forgotten how to look alive. Not just the people, the world. The air hangs heavy, as if the sky itself has been holding its breath since March and doesn't remember how to exhale. It's not fog, not quite. It's more like being wrapped inside a dying campfire. Constant ash, suspended dust. A smell that isn't smoke, but reminds you of burnt cloth and regret. Every breath tastes like something used to live here. It didn't survive. The sun is gone, not metaphorically, not hidden behind clouds. Gone. It still exists, you're told. It rises, technically. but its light is blocked, drowned out by something massive, somewhere far away. A veil of volcanic ash, they whisper. Though no one knows what a volcano is, just that the mountain in the east caught fire, and the sky has been broken ever since. When the sun does appear, it's a faint smudge, a pale disk that hangs behind grey drapery like a prisoner held behind filthy curtains. It gives no warmth, no cheer, just a sickly glow that reminds you you're still alive, and that this isn't a dream, no matter how many times you beg it to be. Shadows don't exist anymore. Everything is grey. Trees are grey. Grass is grey. Mud is grey. People are grey. You start to forget what colour ever meant. Even your memories fade. The idea of green becomes a myth. Something you half recall from stories about forests and summers that no longer happen. Your eyes adjust to this new palette, but your soul doesn't. It twitches in protest each time you wake up to a world drained of pigment, like a painting soaked in grief. The ground doesn't thaw. Even in what should be summer, the dirt remains stiff, half frozen, half miserable. Snow falls in months that once held sunshine. Ice collects on door frames long after the firewood ran out. Crops that used to bend gently in the breeze now snap like dead fingers. And the only green thing you've seen in weeks is mould crawling up the corner of your only food basket. Animals have begun to vanish. The smart ones left early. The rest are bones now. You used to hear goats, chickens, the occasional bark of a dog. Now, silence. The last thing you remember hearing at night was a distant howling. Not a wolf, not quite. Something else. Something that sounded lost. You tried not to think about it. You still do. Rats are the only ones thriving. They breed under your floorboards, feast on spoiled grain, and scurry across your feet with the casual entitlement of landlords. You tried to trap them once, then realised they were better fed than you. Some days you consider asking them where they get their meals. The trees have turned brittle. You used to rely on them for firewood, for warmth, for tools. Now their branches break under their own weight. The bark peels back to reveal rot. Some have blackened entirely, like they were charred by lightning that no one saw. You passed one the other day, its trunk hollow, a perfect circle burned through the centre. No one talks about it. No one needs to. It's just another wound in a world full of them. Even the wind has changed. It doesn't whisper. It doesn't dance. It presses. Like a wet hand on your mouth. Like the breath of something enormous just behind you. You feel it more than hear it. A pressure that makes your ears ring and your stomach turn. When it blows, you don't lean into it. You lean away. There are no birds in the trees anymore. You noticed that months ago. No chirping. No wings. No feathers. Just silence. Broken occasionally by the creak of wood, or the soft, distant collapse of something that used to be a barn. Rain still comes. But it's not the good kind. It's thin and oily and falls sideways. It soaks your clothes instantly, but never quite reaches the ground. You wonder if the clouds are just spitting now, tired of doing their job and settling for passive-aggressive mist. Mud is everywhere. Not the playful kind you see in books. Not the kind children roll in. This mud is permanent, relentless. It pulls at your ankles like it's trying to swallow you. Walk through it too long, and you lose shoes. Or toes. Or hope. Your hovel is surrounded by it. Your dreams are filled with it. You stopped cleaning it off your skin. There's no point. Dirt is your new skin now. You just move it around. Inside your shelter, if that's what you call it, the environment doesn't improve. The cold comes in through every crack. You stuff the walls with straw, then cloth, then regret. None of it helped. The temperature inside is a polite reflection of what's happening outside, minus the dignity. You can see your breath while lying in bed. Some nights you wake up covered in a thin sheen of frost. Other nights you don't wake up at all and just hope your body remembers how. You tried to light a fire last week. The smoke stayed, the warmth didn't. It filled the room with a choking, bitter haze that made your eyes sting and your throat itch. You coughed so hard you cracked a rib. Then you sat in the haze anyway, because even imaginary warmth was better than nothing. Your world is roughly 12 feet by 12 feet. It smells like mildew, fear, and something you've stopped identifying. You share it with 3 other people, 2 relatives, and someone who showed up one night and never left. You think he's a cousin. You don't ask. Everyone needs a corner. Everyone wants to not die. That's the deal. There are no candles. There's no lamp oil. There's no glass to cover a flame, even if you had one. Nights are pitch black, not dark. Black. You can't see your hands. You can't see your breath. You can't see your thoughts. The darkness wraps around you, thick as a wet cloak, and settles into your bones. You lie awake for hours, listening, not because you hear something, but because you might. And that's worse. You've started seeing things. Not clearly, just shapes, flickers, a figure in the fog that's gone when you blink, a whisper that might be wind, or memory, or something else entirely. You don't tell anyone, not because you're ashamed, but because you know they see it too. Everyone does. No one admits it. The smell is the part no one talks about. Probably because there are no words for it. At least, none that have survived this long. It's not just bad. Bad would be manageable. Bad suggests something temporary. Something that might fade. This is something deeper. A kind of rot that clings to your insides, even when you try to ignore it. The air carries layers of decomposition, not just of animals, but of wood, fabric, people, time itself. Things here don't die cleanly. They die slowly. They melt into the soil and linger there. Even the wind carries memory now, and most of it is sour. You try to get used to it, but used to is a luxury. You can't adapt to a smell that changes daily. One day it's wet fur and burnt beans. The next it's mould and tooth decay, and some nameless meat gone soft in the corner. And always, always underneath it, the slow creeping sourness of something human. Not quite dead, not quite alive. Just waiting. Every surface is damp. Not wet, damp. There's a difference. Wet can be wiped. Damp is eternal. You've forgotten what dry feels like. Your blankets are always damp. Your shoes, if you still have them, always squish slightly. Even your hair never fully dries. You once warmed your tunic over fire for an hour. It steamed. Then it rained. Now the tunic smells like smoked sadness and mildew stew. Nothing dries here. Nothing breathes. Everything is just moist enough to make you itchy, but not enough to justify hope. Your home isn't a building. It's a container. For your body, for your shivers, for the occasional rat that wants to borrow space. The walls don't insulate. They just stand there like damp regrets. Every board creaks. Every corner collects some kind of living organism. Mould, fungus, insects. Something that glows faintly at night and no one wants to name. The floor is dirt. Of course it is. Covered in straw, at least in theory. In reality, it's straw. scraps of cloth, wood chips, spilled soup, and something that might have been bread but now hisses when you step on it. It's not even level. One side slopes just enough that when it rains, water pools beneath your bed. You've named the puddle. You call it Thursday. The ceiling leaks, even when it doesn't rain. You're not sure how. It just drips from somewhere. Some beam, some joint, some ancient rot fissure in the thatch that no one has ever been able to find. You've patched it with everything. Clay, wool, even a bit of old bone. Nothing works. It still drips. You gave up. You placed a bowl there once. It filled with something green. You don't check it anymore. Outside there's a forest. Not the kind with fairies. The kind with wolves. The kind that creaks when you walk past. The kind that looks at you. Or maybe that's just your reflection in a puddle. It's hard to say. The trees are too tall, too narrow, and they whisper in ways that don't quite match the wind. You don't go in there unless you have to. You never have to. Paths don't exist anymore. The old Roman roads cracked and vanished. Now you walk where the mud is least angry. You follow where footprints haven't sunk too deep. You use landmarks like the tree that looks like a man begging for forgiveness, or the boulder with the scratch that wasn't there last week. That's navigation. That's how you find your way. And sometimes you don't. The village, if you can call it that, is more of a suggestion. A loose gathering of shapes hunched together, pretending they're not collapsing. The houses lean. The fence is full. The animals roam. What's left of them? No one has time for repair. If something breaks, it stays broken until enough people forget it used to work. Then it's a ruin. Then it's part of the scenery. You've grown used to the idea of everything falling apart. Roofs sag. Doors hang crooked. Walls buckle inward, like they're trying to collapse into themselves and forget what they were. People don't fix things. They repurpose. An old plough becomes a wall brace. A broken cart becomes a bench. A dead man's coat becomes a curtain. Then a rag. Then insulation. Then disappears. There are no tools left. Not really. The good ones rusted. The others were stolen or traded away. What you use now are fragments, a blade tied to a stick, a hammerhead with no handle. You pound, pull, dig, and pray. Sometimes, if you're lucky, the thing you were trying to fix doesn't get worse. Water comes from a stream that probably shouldn't be drunk from. You boil it, when you can, but the taste never leaves. Metallic, earthy, like licking a grave. It's not clear. It's not refreshing. It's necessary. That's it. Water is no longer joy, it's function. You wash in the same stream. Or tried to, then stopped. Washing makes you cold. Cold makes you sick. Sickness makes you useless. Useless gets you buried in the woods. Hygiene is now just damage control. You scrape off the worst parts and try not to think about what's left. Smell is communal. Skin is optional. When it rains, and it always rains, the sound on the roof isn't comforting. It's a reminder that your shelter is temporary, that the sky can always reach you, that if it wanted, it could drown you in your sleep, and no one would blame it. You used to dream of a hearth, a real one, with stone and fire, and maybe something bubbling over it. That dream's gone now. Firewood is scarce. Heat is a memory. Food doesn't bubble. It congeals. You warm what you can, when you can, and tell yourself the steam counts as a blessing. Even if it smells like old boots, the wind gets inside you, through your ears, your sleeves, your ribs. It howls through cracks in the walls and whispers your name in ways that make you shiver. It carries voices sometimes. You know they aren't real. You hope they aren't. A baby crying. A woman laughing. A man saying your name in a language no one uses anymore. You don't tell anyone. You just nod when someone else says, "Did you hear it last night?" And you both agree not to talk about it again. There's something wrong with the birds. The ones that haven't died outright behave oddly. They don't sing anymore. They don't fly the way they should. They hop in circles. They peck at things that aren't there. You found one last week, sitting perfectly still in the road. You walked right past it. It didn't move. It blinked once, then fell over. You didn't touch it, you just kept walking. Insects haven't vanished. Of course not. They're the survivors of this era, the inheritors. They crawl through every crack, chew through every bag, nest in every place you wish they wouldn't. You don't fight them anymore. You coexist. You trade bites. They nibble your bread. You squash the ones that land on your neck. Fair is fair. And through it all, the sky stays the same. Heavy, dim, cold. You stopped hoping for sunlight. You started hoping for a different kind of grey. One that means less cold. One that means maybe today nothing dies. You became a connoisseur of clouds. That one looks friendly. That one looks full of regret. That one reminds me of my uncle. You name them. You forget the names. You start again. You've learned the language of silence. What it means when no one coughs. What it means when the dogs stop barking. What it means when the wind changes direction and the crows all take flight at once. You don't question it. You just feel it, nod, and move indoors. Sometimes you hum. Not a song, just a tone, to fill the space. You've become an expert in gloom. You know how to fold your body into warmth. How to place stones against door frames to keep the worst of the chill out. How to breathe without fogging up the last unbroken window shard. How to listen for frost before it forms. You are not thriving, but you are here, still. And that somehow counts for something. The sky doesn't change. You've watched it, every day, every hour, hoping for a flicker, a shift, a crack in the veil where colour might sneak through. But it doesn't. The ash hangs there, suspended above your head like a closed eye. It doesn't move. It doesn't blink. It just waits. Some days you swear it's getting darker. Others say the same. The old man who lives by the edge of the woods said the world is being swallowed whole, piece by piece. He said it once, before he stopped speaking entirely and started carving strange lines into wood with his teeth. You try not to visit him anymore. The world is still here technically, but it's not alive. It's more like the remains of a feast long since abandoned. Crumbs of civilization, burnt corners, wilted greens. Whatever heat once moved through the earth has crawled deep underground, and whatever gods were watching have clearly closed their eyes. You begin to notice how sound travels differently now. It's slower, muffled, like the air itself is thick, like your voice has to push through wet wool before anyone hears it. Conversations are fewer. Words are rationed. Silence becomes a language of its own, a way of checking on each other without drawing attention from whatever might be listening. And there is something listening. You feel it. You don't name it, but you feel it. Out in the fields, you see movement where there shouldn't be. Not animals, not people, just shifts, hints, the bending of grass that doesn't match the wind, footprints that end halfway across a clearing. Once, you thought you saw a figure out past the ridge, just standing, tall, hunched, unmoving. It was gone when you blinked. Or maybe it wasn't. You don't look that way anymore. Even your tools have begun to change. Rust comes faster now. Iron crumbles in your hands. You sharpen a blade one night, and by morning it's flaking apart like dried meat. You tried to hammer a nail into wood, and the wood groaned, not creaked, groaned, as if tired of being asked to hold anything together. Inside your hut, the walls swell. The floor heaves. Something is growing under the boards. You tell yourself it's just mushrooms. It isn't. Mushrooms don't pulse. You sleep less. Not from insomnia. From caution. Dreams have become unreliable. They leak. You wake up disoriented, thinking you're still in the dream, but the dream is colder than the room, and your arms are already numb. Sometimes your dreams include light. Real light. Golden, thick, hot on your back. You wake up crying. Not loudly. Just a soft, steady wetness on your cheeks. You wipe away before anyone sees. Others in your hut do the same. No one says it, but you know. You all wake up at strange hours. All breathing fast. All still facing the wall. Your body reacts to the environment in ways it never used to. Your nails grow slower, but jagged, curling under. Your skin splits easily. You have cuts you don't remember getting. Scabs that never close. Your lips crack open when you try to speak too clearly. You've developed a tremor in your right hand. A soft, persistent shake that worsens in silence. Your hair is falling out. Everyone's is. No one brings it up. You wake up to strands on your pillow. You sweep them into the fire, or what's left of it. No one weeps over hair anymore. That's a luxury for warmer times. You've grown used to hunger. Not in a peaceful way. In the way that makes you forget what full felt like. Your belly is a hollow drum that hums when you walk. Your limbs shake from effort you didn't notice spending. You lose balance sometimes, just standing up. The world tilts left. You follow it. Food isn't part of the environment anymore. It's something that happens to you like lightning. Rare, uncontrolled, and never when you expect it. You chew bark. You boil grass. You eat roots that taste like soil and sadness. Occasionally a bird falls from the sky. You don't question it. You just cook it. Even if it smells wrong. Especially if it smells wrong. You eat everything now. Everything. Leather. Fat drippings scraped from old cloth. The last of the fermented oats that made someone hallucinate wolves. You eat it anyway. Hunger makes friends with risk, and together they take over your life. Your teeth are beginning to ache. One has turned black. You prod it with your tongue like it might explain itself. It doesn't. You already know how this ends. If it gets worse, you'll pull it. With a knife. Or a rock. Or the back of a spoon. Pain is no longer something you avoid. It's a measurement. A familiar hum. Something you listen to like weather. The animals have begun behaving strangely. The few that remain. Goats no longer bleat, they groan. Chickens stopped laying eggs, then stopped moving, then disappeared. You asked around. No one claimed them. No one cared. Someone buried feathers behind the hut. You didn't ask. Sometimes the dogs howl, but not at the moon. There's no moon anymore. Not that you've seen. Just clouds. Just thick layers of sky that never part. The howl is long. Lonely. Wrong. It ends with a whimper, every time. Like the dog realised too late it was calling for something that doesn't exist. And you still wake up. Every day. You still stretch. Slowly. You still check your limbs for frostbite. You still test your breath in the air to see if you're alive. You are. You are alive. Still. The world isn't trying to kill you. Not actively. It's just lost interest in your survival. It offers no comfort, no help, no hint that things might ever change. The air doesn't reward effort. The sky doesn't react to prayer. The ground doesn't forgive footsteps. You learn to live under the world, not in it. Like a parasite, like mould. You stick to walls. You keep warm by sharing heat with strangers. You sleep in shifts. You breathe shallow. You memorize every creak in the floor, every whisper in the walls, every shadow cast by your only flame. You stop asking, when will it end? You start asking, will I make it to next week? Then, do I want to? And then finally, what would it change? The environment doesn't improve. It never does. It just settles deeper into your bones. You don't resist it anymore. You just wrap yourself in its damp embrace and call it life. You exist. You persist. And that, somehow, is enough. In 536, work isn't something you do. It's something you survive. There's no schedule, no profession, no Monday through Friday. There's just movement and misery. If your body is able to rise, you work. If it's not, you rot. That's the balance. You don't have a job title. No one does. There are no artisans, no specialists, no neatly defined trades with tools and benches and well-lit studios. There's no time for that. If something needs doing, and you haven't collapsed yet, you do it. Even if it kills you, especially if it kills you. Then someone else can take your place and pretend it was your fault. Your day begins in the dark, not dawn dark. That hasn't existed in months. No glow over the trees, no shift in the clouds. Just a vague brightening of the grey, as if the sky is considering letting the world exist again, but not committing to it. You wake with your spine curled like a hook. You don't stretch, not unless you enjoy the sound of joints cracking like damp firewood. Your knees argue with you. Your shoulders pop like old hinges. You move not with purpose, but out of muscle memory and necessity. Hunger is louder than stiffness. First task, survive the walk outside. Your door barely opens now. The wood swells with every drop of rain. You shoulder it open, foot by aching foot, until you can squeeze through. The first blast of cold hits your face like an accusation. The second slips down your neck. The third never leaves. You gather water. It's not clean, but it's water. You take it from the stream, from the runoff, from the barrel by the wall that collects rain and bugs and moss. You strain it through cloth. Sometimes you remember to boil it. Sometimes you don't. Most days you're too tired to care. Then it's firewood, which is funny because there's none. Trees have been picked clean. You burn twigs, bark, straw. You gather dung if you're lucky because dung burns longer. You pretend it's comforting. You pretend it smells like warmth. You lie to yourself with your nose plugged. Food comes next, or the concept of it. You scavenge. You dig. You look for roots, bulbs, weeds that won't poison you. You know which ones do. You ate them last week. It was a long night. You don't want to talk about it. You check traps, not because you're a hunter, but because you once read hope in the tracks of a rat, and now you cling to it. Most days the traps are empty. Some days they're not. You don't ask what you're eating. If it bleeds and doesn't bite too hard, it goes in the pot. Then come the fields, or what's left of them. A field in 536 is not a garden. It's a battlefield. You against the land. And the land is winning. The soil is hard, brittle. It crumbles where it should clump and clumps where it should yield. You press seeds into it, like apologies, hoping something will take root. But nothing does. The seeds rot. The shoots freeze. The sprouts wither before they see the light. And still you try. You till with sticks. You turn the earth with bent tools, worn stones, your own hands if needed. You plant barley, rye, beans. You whisper prayers as you do. Not because you believe, but because someone once told you the sky listens. You know it doesn't. But routine is a form of warmth too. You carry things. Always. Buckets, rocks, wood, bones. Things that don't need moving, but get moved anyway because standing still makes your legs forget how to work. You lift with your back because your arms are weak. You drop things, you apologise. To no one, you dig holes. For storage, for garbage, for graves. No one asks which kind. You just dig. The dirt fights back. It's wet. Clumpy. Heavy with things that used to live. You scrape past roots, bones, bottles, old nails, new regrets. The shovel breaks. You use your hands. If someone else is nearby, you don't talk. Not unless needed. Labour is silent now. Words cost calories. And there's nothing to say anyway. Cold? Yes. Hungry? Always. Still breathing? For now. Sometimes you help repair the hut. A roof beam. A fallen wall. The door hinge. Everything sags. Everything leans. You prop it up with hope and string and the last piece of leather that hasn't turned to mould. You pretend it's working. You pretend the hole in the ceiling isn't getting bigger. Work follows you into night. There's no stopping, no punch clock. Just the steady progression of fatigue. Your hands grow numb. Your feet blister. Your back hums like a swarm of bees made of needles. You carry pain like a sack. Heavy. Familiar. Yours. There is no rest. There's only collapse. You eat, barely. Then lie down. Not in a bed? That's generous. You lie on what you've gathered, what you haven't burned. Rags, bark. Your own coat. You curl into yourself and hope for stillness. Not sleep, just stillness. Tomorrow you do it again, if you can. If your lungs still inflate. If your legs still hold. If the sky doesn't finally fall and finish what the mountain started. This is labour in 536. It isn't noble. It isn't character building. It's punishment without a crime. You don't work to live. You work to not die yet. There's no variety in the work. Only repetition. You do the same things every day, not because they're working, but because no one has a better idea. You plant. Things don't grow. You dig. Holes fill with water. You mend. The mending comes undone. You patch your roof, and the wind laughs in your face. You scrape lichen from stones, and pretend it's something new. You churn labour like a broken mill, hoping effort alone will convince the universe to change its mind. There are no holidays, no festivals, no breaks. The old feasts, the harvest celebrations, the solstice rites, the midwinter songs, have withered with the crops. You still observe them, maybe. But not with joy, just with obligation. Maybe a candle, maybe a crust of bread. You mutter old chants with numb lips, not to honour the gods, but to keep your tongue from forgetting how to move. You're not working for reward anymore. You're working for delay. Every task is a way to push death a little further down the path. Fix the fence? Maybe wolves won't take the last goat. Stack the firewood? Maybe your cousin won't freeze again. Stir the soup? Maybe you'll forget that it's 98% boiled weeds and 2% something unnameable you found stuck to your boot. You've learned to see time differently. A job isn't a project, it's a measure of survival. If something takes 3 hours to complete, you calculate what will happen if you collapse a tower too. If something requires both hands, you decide which hand you can afford to injure. You hold tools not with confidence, but with suspicion. Everything is a trap. And still, you work. You sharpen things constantly. Not because they need it, but because sharpening is easier than using them. You sit with a blade and a rock, and you scrape. And scrape. And scrape. The sound becomes familiar. Predictable. It's one of the few sounds you can still control. A little whistle of effort. A little grind of focus. A tiny escape from thought. Sometimes you're told to help with animals. That's almost funny now. What animals? Half the livestock died when the sun disappeared. The rest are either sick, angry, or both. You don't raise animals anymore. You negotiate with them. You try to milk a goat. It kicks you. You try again. It stares at you like you've offended its ancestors. Eventually, you get a few spoonfuls of something that might have once been milk and now smells like vengeance. You drink it anyway. Your stomach protests. You ignore it. It's not your stomach's year, frankly. Feeding them is worse. You have nothing. They have less. You toss straw, scraps, wilted greens. Sometimes they eat. Sometimes they look at you with the hollow judgment of beings who know you're failing them. You whisper apologies. They don't forgive you. You don't blame them. And then, of course, there's human waste. The other side of labour. No one talks about it, but it's constant. A daily burden. There are no toilets, no privacy, no system. You have a designated corner behind the hut. A shallow trench, if you're lucky. You go there with the shame of someone who remembers what dignity used to feel like. Sometimes the waste freezes before you can bury it. Sometimes it doesn't freeze enough and flows back toward your door in the rain. You wake to a puddle of memory and filth. You clean it. You retch. You pray. Not because you think God is listening, but because the alternative is thinking too much. You work while injured. Of course you do. There's no choice. A twisted ankle means you limp and carry smaller loads. A deep cut means you bind it with whatever's available. Cloth, moss, string, even bits of leather. And keep moving. Infection is common. Antibiotics are fiction. You don't ask for help. No one has anything left to give. You adapt. You learn to shovel with one hand. You plough with your knees braced together to keep your ribs from shifting. You carry water with your teeth clenched because crying is too expensive. You lash a stick to your leg if the bone feels wrong. You whisper instructions to yourself while working, not because you're crazy, but because the silence gets inside your head and starts rearranging things. If someone falls, collapses in the field, sinks to their knees, curls up by the side of the shed, no one panics, no one runs. You walk over. Check if they're breathing. If they are, you help them up. If they're not, you close their eyes and move them into the shade. Later, someone will dig a hole. Or not. Depends how deep the frost is. You don't stop to grieve. You barely stop to notice. You keep working. Because grief is work now too. It costs energy. It takes time. It opens doors you don't have the strength to shut again. You might wonder, what keeps you going? The answer changes daily. Sometimes it's inertia. Sometimes it's guilt. Sometimes it's the look in someone's eyes when they hand you the last bite of something they needed more than you. Sometimes it's the sound of bread rising, barely, and the memory of what food used to feel like in your mouth. Sometimes it's just stubbornness, that petty primal defiance that whispers, not yet, not today. So you work, through hunger, through pain, through rain and wind and the quiet, creeping cold that never leaves your bones. You lift, you scrape, you carry, you break, you bend, you bleed. You work not because there's something to gain, but because stopping would mean noticing the void waiting to swallow you whole. Work is your mask, your wall, your distraction, your anchor. Without it, you would drift, and no one ever returns from drifting. You don't take pride in your work. That idea, pride, has long since frozen over and shattered. Work is not an identity anymore. It's not a calling. It's not something you do because you want to. It's what happens when your body refuses to die, and you haven't figured out how to make that mean something else. And even if you did take pride, no one would notice. There are no compliments in 536. No good job. No pats on the back. Just silence. Or worse, another task. Some days the labour is pointless. You repair a fence, knowing there's nothing left to keep in. You haul water from a stream that's going to flood anyway. You help rebuild a roof on a hut that's already half collapsed. But you do it. Because doing something is still better than sitting still and feeling the weight of the air press against your chest like a warning. And besides, what else would you do? Leisure is extinct. Recreation is a myth. There are no pastimes. There's no music, no games, no books, no distractions. The idea of free time doesn't exist here. Not because no one's thought of it, but because it sounds dangerous. Free time means empty time. And empty time means your mind starts to move in directions you don't want it to go. So you stay busy. Not efficiently, not skillfully, just constantly. When someone asks for help, you never say no. Not because you're generous, but because you know what it means to need something and not get it. You lift what they can't, stitch what they won't, carry what they dropped. No one says thank you. It isn't rude, it's just forgotten. Gratitude takes energy. And energy is a finite resource. Children, if there are any left in your village, work too. They don't play, not in the way you remember. They mimic, copy, repeat. They watch adults and do smaller versions of what they see. A boy dragging a stick through frozen earth. A girl squatting by a pail. Her arms too weak to lift it. No smiles, just effort. Born into a world where exhaustion is their first language. You don't remember what it felt like to be a child. To run for fun. To laugh without reason. To wake without dread. Those are someone else's memories now. Maybe yours, maybe not. It doesn't matter. You wouldn't recognise yourself back then. That person couldn't survive this year. The worst jobs are the ones that require thought, decisions, trade, risk. These still happen even now. Sometimes you need to barter. Something broken for something barely working. A pot for a knife. A piece of string for a cracked bowl. The negotiations are silent, harsh, and mostly driven by suspicion. Every deal ends with both sides feeling cheated, and both sides pretending it didn't happen. You walk to the next village to trade sometimes. It's a half-day trip, if you're lucky. Longer if the roads are flooded, or if wolves are hunting. You carry what little you have wrapped in cloth. Half a spool of twine, a spoon, a bit of fat, a scrap of iron. You get there, and hope someone still lives there. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Sometimes you arrive, and the only sound is the wind moving through doors that no one closed. You leave something anyway, just in case. You take something, just in case. You don't call it stealing. Not anymore. You speak less than you used to. Your voice is a tool now, blunt, rusty, functional. You use it when necessary, to warn, to call, to grunt instructions. Anything more feels dangerous, like peeling bark off something too soft underneath. You hear others do the same. Half words, muted vowels, the syllables of a species that's forgotten how to speak with its mouth full of ash. You still sweat, oddly enough, even in the cold. You bend and lift and dig, and your body reacts like it used to, pouring heat out of pores that haven't been cleaned in months. The sweat sticks to your skin. It chills. It freezes. You shiver. You get sick. You keep working. The cycle continues. You used to dream about rest. Now you fear it. Rest means slowing down. Slowing down means noticing. And noticing is the first step to despair. You don't want to see how thin your fingers have gotten. You don't want to feel how loose your teeth are becoming. You don't want to admit that your breath rattles in your chest at night. So you keep moving. You sweep dirt, not to clean, to pretend. You scrub rust off blades that will snap the next time they're used. You wash clothes in icy water, even though they will be dirty again by sundown. You dig through old baskets looking for crumbs that rats might have missed. You check the same shelf 4 times, just to feel like you're still in control of something. And at night, when it's too dark to see and too cold to think, you lie in your corner and imagine tomorrow. Not in a hopeful way, not in a dreaming way, just as a shape, a vague form, a chance to repeat the same tasks in slightly different conditions. A copy of today printed 1 shade darker. This is your work. Endless, unrewarded, unacknowledged. But you do it. Not because you're strong, not because you're brave, but because you are still here. And in 536, that is the only job that matters, to remain. You'd think, in a year like this, a year with no sun, no food, and no future, that class wouldn't matter. That everyone would come together. That shared suffering would equal shared humanity. It doesn't. It never did. If anything, the darkness has made the hierarchy clearer. You are poor. Not low income, not working class. Just poor. In a way that's too heavy to lift and too familiar to question. You are born in the mud. You will die in the mud. And if someone bothers to bury you, it will likely be in more mud. You don't dream of rising. You dream of not sinking faster. Your place in society isn't up for debate. It's carved into your spine. You stand crooked, bow slightly when you talk, and never meet the eyes of someone wearing cleaner wool than you. That's not manners. That's survival. Above you are the landowners. Not lords exactly. Just people who are lucky enough to inherit a hut with a fence and a name that someone wrote down once. They own things. Goats, tools, dry bread. Some even own books they can't read, just to remind everyone else they don't have them. They don't work like you do. They oversee. They nod. They point. Sometimes they lift a finger, and that finger is worth more than your entire week's labour. When they speak to you, it's not conversation. It's instruction. Do this. Carry that. You missed a spot. That's not how it's done. You never correct them, even when they're wrong. Even when they tell you to dig in the wrong place, or ruin a perfectly good pot of pottage by adding spoiled turnip. You nod. You say yes. You fix it later. Quietly. Because the cost of correcting someone with dry boots is a week of colder nights. Or worse. The local priest is higher still. Not because he owns anything, but because he owns belief. And belief in this year is more valuable than bread. He speaks Latin, or something close to it. No one understands him, but that doesn't matter. He wears robes, he lights candles. He reads from a book with gold on the edges. That makes him important. He decides what's a sin, what's a punishment, what's a curse, and what's just God testing your humility. If your child dies, he nods solemnly and says something about divine wisdom. If your crop fails, he says it's because you didn't pray hard enough. If your roof collapses in the rain, he says it's a metaphor. You nod. You agree. You drop a piece of your last bread into the collection basket. He thanks you, then eats it. The priest doesn't farm. He doesn't dig. He doesn't sweat. But when he walks through the village, people make space. Even the dogs. Even the flies. His robe moves like it knows secrets. Then there are the guards, if your village has them, hired by someone richer than you'll ever meet, and armed with spears, old swords, or just heavy sticks with nails hammered through them. They don't protect you. They protect what's above you. Stores of food, locked gates, people who have rooms with walls on all four sides. You don't talk to the guards. You don't look at them unless they speak first. They treat every conversation like an interrogation. They ask where you're going, what you're carrying, what you're thinking. You answer politely, even if your hands are bleeding and your stomach is empty, because rudeness is a punishable offence. Punishment doesn't mean jail. That's a luxury. Punishment means labour. Harder labour. Public humiliation. Or something worse, with wood and rope and no one willing to watch. You know your place, because everyone reminds you of it. Every building you can't enter. Every piece of clothing you're not allowed to wear. Every loaf of bread you can smell, but not afford. Even your own tools, dull, bent, splintered, are reminders. The sharp ones belong to someone else. You eat last, if there's anything left. You sleep furthest from the fire. You fetch water, but don't drink first. You speak only when it doesn't slow anyone down. There's a woman in the village who owns a mirror. It's cracked, fogged, more decoration than function. But it's hers. No one else dares touch it. She keeps it covered in cloth, as if even its reflection is something you're not allowed to see. She doesn't speak to you. Once, she watched you fall while carrying a bucket of slop. You looked up from the mud, expecting a hand. She turned away. Later, she mentioned it to someone else. She said you slipped like a pig. They laughed. You didn't. You've never been inside her hut. You've never stood on her porch. If she ever invited you inside, you'd clean your feet first, bow at the threshold, and speak in half sentences until dismissed. And you'd leave grateful for the honour of not being scolded. You know someone who was beaten for borrowing a cooking pot? Not stealing. Borrowing. They returned it, cleaned. Still warm, but they didn't ask. And asking is what separates respect from rebellion. The man who beat him? He's the cousin of the man who once traded grain with the uncle of someone who served at the local hall. That makes him important. That gives him rights. He says, "Don't touch my things." You say, "Of course." You say, "It won't happen again." You help him tie the rope around the broken fence, the same one he just made you carry for 3 miles. Status isn't just a structure here, it's an infection. A creeping awareness that follows you through every gesture, every meal, every silence. And no matter how much you suffer, no matter how much your hands bleed, or your spine bends, or your lungs wheeze, someone will always find a way to make sure you remember you are still not enough. You learn to lower your eyes. It's one of the first skills they don't teach you, but you pick it up fast. Looking directly at someone wealthier than you is dangerous. It suggests equality. Worse, it suggests awareness. People don't like being seen from below, so you look down. At your feet, at your hands. At the bowl you're scrubbing for someone who'll never thank you. The ground becomes your horizon. Eye contact is for those with options. You don't speak unless you're asked, if you're asked. And even then, your answers are short, modest, apologetic. You've seen what happens when someone tries to sound clever. You remember the boy who used a word no one else knew, a word he picked up from a travelling monk. He said it by mistake. Fortitude, or grace, something like that. The others didn't like it. They thought it was mockery. They told him to say it again, then again, then again. Then they made him dig a ditch and sleep in it. Now he only speaks with nods. Hierarchy here isn't about crowns or kings. It's smaller, petty, local. The man who owns 2 goats instead of 1, higher. The woman whose hands aren't cracked, higher. The boy with a belt that still buckles, higher. Status is in the margins, the little things. Clean fingernails, a whole cloak, the ability to finish a sentence without coughing. And everyone knows the game, even children. You've seen them playing, mimicking their parents. One plays Lord, the others crawl in the dirt, pretending to be servants. The Lord tells them what to do, what to say, what to carry. The others obey, because even in pretend, the roles feel familiar. One child refuses, says it's stupid. The next day he's playing alone. Even in darkness, people climb on each other. No ladder required, just enough light to see who's beneath you. You remember once, just once, someone offered you food. A man with a thick coat and boots you envied. He held out a piece of dried meat. You hesitated. Not because you didn't want it, but because you weren't sure if it was a joke. If taking it meant losing something else. Self-respect, maybe. Or teeth. You reached for it, slowly. He didn't smile, just nodded, like he was feeding a dog that might bite. You chewed that meat for an hour. Not because it was tough, because you weren't ready to swallow what came with it. Sometimes the humiliation is silent, unspoken, but felt. A cup passed to everyone but you. A bench where there's room, but not for your kind of body. A pot of stew you helped stir, served to others while you sit nearby pretending you're not hungry. It's not cruelty, it's tradition. You tell yourself it's not personal. It never is. You're not singled out because they hate you. You're ignored because they don't have to see you. There's a difference. One is anger. The other is infrastructure. The clothes you wear tell your rank before you speak. There's no variety. Just degrees of decay. The finer the stitch, the higher the status. The less frayed the edges, the more respect you'll get. You try to patch your tunic when it tears. Not for modesty, for optics. A hole near the knee means weakness. A tear in the sleeve means you don't know how to fix things. Or worse, you don't have anyone who cares enough to fix them for you. When people walk past you, you listen for how their shoes sound. Soft, thick leather. That's someone you bow to. Hard soles on dry dirt. That's someone who might let you share their fire. Bare feet like yours. That's reflection. Not competition, not threat, just a reminder. There's a man in the next hut who once owned a horse. That makes him royalty now. People still mention it. He rode, they whisper. Doesn't matter that the horse died last spring. Doesn't matter that he can barely stand. He rode. That story alone gives him a kind of gravity. When he speaks, people listen. Not because he's wise, but because they want to be near someone who touched saddle leather. The social ladder has no top, just a series of slightly less cold rungs. You climb by luck, marriage, inheritance, or someone else's misfortune. You descend by getting sick, stepping out of line, or simply being born a little too ugly. And you were born at the bottom, not even on the ladder. More like beneath it, holding it steady while others argue over who gets to stand 1 inch higher. You carry things for people who think your name is Boy, even though you're 30. You chop wood for people who remind you to mind the splinters, as if you didn't spend last winter bleeding from your palms. You cook for people who spit out the food and ask you what went wrong, as if you planted the turnips yourself, as if you made the frost, as if the rot in the potatoes is your fault personally. When someone visits the village, rare, but it happens, you're told to stand aside, not because you're in the way, but because you don't add anything to the scene. You ruin it. Your face, your hands, your smell. You're an embarrassment. Something to be hidden like a crack in the wall or a rat in the grain sack. Even your silence is judged. If you're quiet at the wrong time, it's suspicion. If you speak at the wrong time, it's insolence. If you laugh, that's the worst. Laughter means comfort, confidence. That makes people nervous. No one wants someone beneath them feeling joy. So you laugh softly, if at all, to yourself, in the dark, at things no one else needs to know. No one tells you where you belong. They don't have to. It's in the way they walk past you, the way their voice changes when speaking down, the way they pause before handing you something, like their fingers might catch your condition. The caste system of your world has no titles, no laws, no parchment seals. It's stitched into the muscle memory of a dying culture, passed down through tone, through posture, through meals you're not invited to and stories that start after you leave the room. You clean, constantly, not because it works, but because being dirty and poor means you're doubling your offence. You scrape your hands until the skin flakes. You brush crumbs from your cloak, even when there's nothing left to eat. You polish things that aren't yours. Tools, plates, even boots. Because polished things reflect something. Not you, but something. You don't expect thanks. You've gone whole seasons without hearing your name spoken with kindness. You've started responding to gestures, a glance, a cleared throat, a pointed finger. They don't speak to you. They at you. Once, someone thanked you. You remember it like a fever dream. A younger woman, sick, maybe new to this place, touched your arm after you handed her water. She said thank you, with her voice, out loud. For a second, you forgot where you were. You smiled. She didn't do it again. A man saw. He whispered to her later. Not angrily, just clearly, slowly. She nodded. Next time she passed you, she looked over your head, like you were a piece of furniture that had once startled her, but now wasn't worth the attention. You understand? You do. No one wants to be brought down by association. You speak simply, always. No metaphor. No cleverness. Cleverness is seen as threat. You once made a joke, just one. It landed poorly. You spent the next week sleeping outside the hut, in the mud, next to a fire you weren't allowed to use. Lesson learned. The richer families, the ones with real walls, full roofs, meet more than once a month. They don't treat you cruelly. They just treat you correctly. Like you are part of the necessary background, the labour that keeps things going, the breath behind the bread, the hands behind the bowl. They ask you to wait outside, even in rain. They offer you food with one hand while wiping their own with the other. They let you clean their chamber pots, then remind you not to track any filth back in. You thank them, always, even when you're gagging. Especially then. And then there's the church, the place where status goes to get polished, where the lines between rich and poor aren't erased, just consecrated. You all kneel in the same building, yes. You all face the same altar, yes. But some kneel on straw, others on rugs, some have blankets, Others freeze. Communion is the same bread, allegedly, but theirs is warm. Yours is hard. The priest walks past them with a nod. He walks past you with a prayer. That's the difference. One is a man, the other is a soul in need of handling. You once saw a merchant's child spill wine on the chapel floor. People rushed to help. When your neighbour sneezed during the sermon, he was slapped and told to confess his pride. Pride, as if you had any left. You're invited to weddings only to clean, to births only to carry water, to deaths only to dig holes. The ceremonies happen without you. You hover at the edge, waiting for permission to approach, not as a mourner, not as a guest, but as a tool. You are the broom after the feast, the shovel after the prayers, the silence after the song. Your value is measured in absence. If you do your job well, you aren't noticed. If you do it poorly, suddenly everyone remembers your name. You've seen what happens when someone tries to leave their rung. It's never violent, not at first, just cold. They're denied tools, denied space at the fire. Their name becomes something muttered, then mispronounced, then forgotten. If they keep reaching, punishment follows. More work, less food. Then one day they're gone, moved on, disappeared, buried. No one clarifies which. You've never considered moving up. You wouldn't know where to begin. What would you do? Ask. With what words? In what tone? Wearing what clothes? In a world built on invisible ropes, climbing is just a faster way to hang. So you bow, you shuffle. You say thank you when ordered and yes when blamed. You tuck your shame into your belt next to your knife and your crumb rag and your only spoon. And you carry it, quietly, daily, like everyone else below the line. You're not just beneath them, you're their proof that they're above something. Your humiliation is part of the architecture. Without it, the whole place might collapse. You believe in things now, not because you want to, because not believing would leave too much empty space in your head. And in 536, empty space is dangerous. It invites thoughts, doubts, echoes, and the echo of a godless question can swallow a person whole. So you believe. You believe the sun is gone because someone sinned. You believe the cold is a test. You believe the ash in the sky is proof that heaven is watching and not impressed. You didn't always believe this. But belief is like hunger. You learn to accept things you once gagged on. The church is your clock now. There are no hours, just bells. You wake to bells, you work to bells, you pray to bells, you fall asleep to the memory of bells echoing in your ribs. They tell you when to kneel, when to fast, when to feel guilty, when to fake relief. You don't understand the words spoken during Mass. They're in Latin, or something close to it, slurred syllables and holy fragments passed down through cracked teeth and centuries of repetition. You mouth along, but it's performance. Everyone knows that. Even the priest, especially the priest. He's not here to teach. He's here to remind you that your suffering is temporary in this world, that heaven is real, that joy is eternal, that fire is punishment, that you may be freezing now, but hell is hotter, much hotter. He paints pictures you can't see, a kingdom of gold and light, a place with warmth and music and no hunger, a place where your name is known, where your body doesn't ache, where your child didn't die last spring because you ran out of oats. You nod, you kneel, you try not to cry in public. Tears can be mistaken for doubt. Faith is not comfort. Faith is insulation. A thin, scratchy layer of meaning between you and the horror of being born into a world that offers you pain and calls it a blessing. You wear your belief like you wear your tunic, not because it fits, but because it's what you have. There are rituals for everything, for sickness, for weather, for childbirth, which is mostly just a countdown to whether anyone survives. You cross yourself before meals, even if the meal is bark boiled in dirty water. You murmur blessings before walking into the woods. You draw a line of ash above your doorway each winter and whisper the names of saints who probably never existed. You don't ask for miracles. You ask for silence. No plague this week. No wolves. No children coughing blood in the night. That's all. That's enough. The saints are many. You forget their names. You mix them up. There's one for sore joints, one for animals, one for crops. You pray to all of them at once, just in case. You light candles when you can. They don't last. You watch them burn down to nothing and imagine the flame is your fear, finally small enough to snuff out. It never is. Superstition grows like moss in this world. It fills the cracks in religion, parts too quiet, too slow, too far away. So you do both. You kneel in church and you bury a hairbraid under your hut to keep spirits away. You kiss the cross and tie bones to your belt. You repeat the Lord's Prayer and whisper to the wind before you sleep. You don't believe all of it, but belief isn't about truth. It's about rhythm, structure, a place to put your panic. When the moon vanished, no one asked why. You heard stories that it was eaten by demons, or cloaked by God, or that it simply got tired of watching. No one argued. You all just nodded. Someone tied a charm to the well. Someone else smeared oil on a doorframe. No one questioned it. Why would they? The world is unravelling. And when the thread breaks, people cling to knots. You're told to confess. You do, even when you haven't done anything. You make things up. You say you were prideful. You say you were lazy. You say you had thoughts that didn't belong. Not because you believe these are sins, because it feels good to be forgiven, even when you're innocent. It feels like permission to go on. You don't ask questions about God, not because you're afraid of the answers, but because you know there aren't any. The priest once said, "The Lord moves in mysterious ways." You think, yes, very mysterious. Like a stranger who borrowed your lantern and then vanished into the woods with it. Still you kneel. Still you bow your head. Still you whisper prayers through chapped lips as your breath curls in the frost. Because prayer isn't about answers. It's about not being alone with the silence. The silence is worse than the cold. Because silence can think back. They tell you the world is broken because of sin, which is convenient. It means everything bad is your fault, even if you can't remember why. It keeps the whip in the right hands and the guilt in yours. You don't remember doing anything wrong, but maybe you did. Maybe everyone did. Maybe some child somewhere forgot to say grace, and now the sun is gone. Maybe that's all it takes. The people in your village all believe something slightly different, but no one says it out loud. That would be dangerous. So you all pretend to believe the same thing. You nod at the same moments. You repeat the same lines. You burn the same herbs. You lie to the sky together hoping it counts. You remember a time, barely, when belief was gentler. When stories were told by firelight, and saints had personalities, and miracles felt like something you could reach for if you were good. Now it's different. Now belief is armour. Heavy, cracked, but necessary. You are told to fast, so you do. Even though you're already starving. You give up food you don't have, and thank the church for the chance to prove your devotion. You are told to confess, so you do. Even when you have nothing left to admit, you invent flaws. I was angry. I envied the man with boots. I dreamed of warmth. You are told to obey, so you do. Even when the orders make no sense. Even when they contradict each other. Even when someone dies because of it. Especially then. The people with power use belief like a ladder, climbing higher while telling you to stay at the bottom and be grateful for the view. They say your suffering is noble. They say hardship purifies. They say the meek shall inherit the earth. You want to ask when, but you don't. You keep your mouth shut and your eyes low and your hands folded in case someone holy is watching. And always you feel watched. By the priest? By your neighbours? By the sky? By something else? You stop doing things not because they're wrong, but because they look wrong. You stop dancing. You stop singing. You stop carving symbols into wood, even though they comforted you. You stop laughing too loud, or speaking too fast, or questioning why no one touches each other anymore. Because maybe God is listening, or maybe your neighbour is. And sometimes, in this world, they're the same thing. Culture here is not art. It's not beauty. It's what's left after everything beautiful is gone. A frayed banner still hanging in the chapel, though no one remembers what it means. A song with half the words lost, sung every winter because it's what's done. A superstition scratched into wood above your doorframe. Something your grandmother taught you to do when someone dies. You never asked why. You just do it. You go through the motions. You draw the shapes in the air. You light the candle. You blow it out. You say the phrase, you mean none of it. You mean all of it. Because in this year, in this endless dusk, meaning is a luxury. But habit is survival. You hear rumours of other villages, ones where they worship different gods. New ones. Old ones. Ones that eat the dead. Ones that never left the woods. You don't believe the stories, but you don't not believe them either. You sleep facing the door now, just in case. There are omens everywhere. Birds flying west. Dogs howling at nothing. A child born with eyes too wide. A well that runs dry the day after someone swore. You've learned not to point them out. Not unless you want to be blamed. You've seen what happens when someone names an omen too loudly. The priest says, possessed. The village says, cursed. And then someone's sleeping in the woods, missing a shoe and 2 teeth. It's safer to nod and keep walking. And yes, there are still stories, myths, legends. You hear them by firelight in hushed voices, with glances over shoulders. Of the man who walked into the ash and returned blind but glowing. Of the girl who never ate and never died. Of the priest who spoke to the sky and it answered back with thunder. Of the wolf with a man's voice who asks you questions in your sleep. You don't ask if they're true, because here the truth of a story is less important than its shape. A story is a net. It catches fear, gives it form, lets you hold it for a moment without drowning. You believe what you need to. And some days you believe too much. You thought you saw something in the woods. It looked like a figure, but taller, and too still. You told yourself it was a trick of the light. Then you remembered there is no light, so now you pray harder. Not because you know what you're praying to, but because you want something to be listening, even if it's not God. Belief is not optional in 536. It's not an accessory. It's not a personal journey. It's not a late night question whispered to the stars. It's survival. It fills your mouth before hunger does. It occupies your spine before cold. It tells you who you are before your name does. You don't remember the moment you started believing. It wasn't dramatic. There was no thunder, no voice from the skies. Just one day you realised that your hands moved in prayer before you even thought about it. You crossed yourself when the wind blew too suddenly. You mumbled blessings over your feet before putting them into your boots. The actions came first, then the meaning, then the fear. You live in a loop of reverence and repression. They're indistinguishable now. When the sun vanished, belief filled the gap. Not with warmth, but with words. Stories, explanations, consolations, threats. The priest said it was penance. The old women said it was a sign. The children said nothing, just stared at the sky and forgot how to blink. You needed it to mean something. Because if it didn't mean something, then it meant nothing. And nothing is harder to survive than nothing. So it became a test, a trial, a punishment, a chapter in a book written by hands you'd never see. And like any story, it needed characters. Heroes, sinners, redeemers. You tried to guess which one you were. Culture now is a machine powered by suffering, and belief is its engine oil. Festivals still exist, barely. Their names echo like ghosts. The Feast of Ash, the Silent Mass, the Day of Smoke. No dancing, no drums. Just fasting, kneeling, listening to a man read from a book while your stomach howls. You watch the candles burn down, and every drop of wax feels like another drop of your soul hardening into ritual. You still celebrate saints' days, not with joy, but with obligation. You wake early, wash yourself in freezing water, and go stand in a line outside a stone chapel too small to hold the living, let alone their sins. Inside, the air is damp. The floor is dirt. The sermon is long. You don't understand most of it. No one does. But understanding is not the point. Obedience is. Every feast is a fast now. Every hymn a dirge. Every tradition a chain you polish instead of break. Belief bleeds into your chores. You whisper blessings over every act, chopping wood, gutting fish, tying knots. A bad harvest isn't just unfortunate. It's divine consequence. A stubbed toe is a warning. A broken pot is a lesson. A dying child is a reminder. You say grace before meals, even if it's just boiled moss. You cover mirrors when someone dies, even if there's nothing left to reflect. You close your eyes when the wind howls from the west, because everyone knows what that means. No one agrees on what it means, but everyone knows. There's a prayer for that. There's a prayer for everything. Your voice has grown hoarse from repetition, but it doesn't matter. The shape of the words is what counts. Their weight in your mouth. The rhythm of them beating like a second heart in your chest. Belief doesn't need to be beautiful. It needs to be heavy. Control comes through the calendar now. Not in months, but in rituals. Each day marked by what you must do, what you must not do, and what you must fear. The priest tells you which saints to invoke. The elders tell you which omens to avoid. The rest you fill in with habit and rumour and whispers from a time before everything went dark. You wear charms sewn into your sleeves. You knot red thread around your wrist. You keep one coin in your shoe to ward off poverty, even though poverty lives in your gut now. You carve symbols into wood, stone, bread. You forget what they mean. You do it anyway. Every story carries weight now. Every tale is a warning, a map through the fog, a rope stretched across the dark. You believe in things you can't name, the knocking in the walls, the shadow that doesn't belong to anything, cry you heard from the well that didn't echo quite right. There are rules too. Don't whistle indoors. Don't sleep with your feet pointing east. Don't eat meat on a Wednesday unless it bled that morning. You follow them all, not because you understand, but because the one time you broke one, your brother fell sick. Coincidence is a sin now. Everything has meaning, or else nothing does. You remember what someone once said, the gods are listening. You wonder if that's true. Then again, you never asked whether they were listening, only whether they were angry. No one here asks for kindness, just survival, just a little less punishment, just a breath that doesn't hurt. You confess things you've never done, just to stay ahead of the storm. You tell the priest your thoughts, your fears, your dreams, even the ones you made up just to fill the silence. He nods. He touches your head. He says words you don't understand. You feel forgiven. It lasts an hour, maybe 2. You've seen what happens to those who refuse belief. Or once there was a man who laughed during Mass. Not at anything, just laughed. A sound that didn't belong. The next day no one spoke to him. The next week his hut burned. No one helped him rebuild. He moved on. Or vanished. Or both. Another woman claimed she heard a voice at night. Not God's. She said it asked her questions. She said it knew her name. She said it promised her something. They took her to the river, they prayed. They dunked her under once, twice, a third time. She didn't come up. They said it was mercy. They said it was cleansing. They said it was justice. You nodded. You repeated the words. You didn't sleep for a week. You don't trust dreams anymore. You pray before sleep, not for protection, but for silence. You ask God to keep your mind quiet, to close the windows, to keep the thoughts from leaking in. Because in 536, doubt is a luxury, and silence is sacred. You wake, you kneel, you bless your food, your hands, your tools, your thoughts. You keep your mouth shut. You say only what you've been told. You sing the right songs. You fear the right shadows. You believe the right lies. Because the only thing worse than being wrong here is being alone in it. By now, your sense of normal is not just broken. It's fermented, curdled, moulded into something that would terrify the version of you that existed before the sun disappeared. But that version of you is gone, starved out, frozen quiet, buried in frost and mud and repetition. Now normal is different. Normal is waking up unsure if the smell in the air is rot or breakfast. Normal is watching someone cough blood onto snow and calling it a good day, all things considered. Normal is knowing that if you found a clean sock in the woods, you'd still eat it if it smelled like garlic. The horror now isn't screaming. It's the lack of screaming. A child goes missing, and no one looks. Not because they don't care, but because they already know. The woods are deeper than they should be. They move when you're not watching. People go in, and sometimes the forest gives something back. But it's not always the same shape as before. You've seen things. Everyone has. Shapes in the fog. Faces behind windows that haven't had glass in months. Fingers too long to belong to anything human. But no one talks about it directly. Instead you say things like, "The shadows were restless last night," or "I saw the dog looking at the sky again," or "The fire burned green this morning," and everyone nods. No follow-up questions, no eye contact, just silence. Because you know what they know. If you talk too clearly, it hears you. It meaning, well, no one knows exactly, but something. Not the devil, not God. Something local, something shaped like hunger, with a face made of fog and laughter made of wind through bones. Once, during a blizzard, someone heard music coming from the woods. Not singing, not drumming, just music. Strange rhythms. Notes that didn't belong to any human mouth or hand. A few people followed it. They said they wanted to pray. They didn't come back. But 3 days later, a goat gave birth to something with teeth that looked like fingers. No one slaughtered it. No one touched it. They just left it tied to a post. And each night, it made a sound like a lullaby underwater. It died on the 7th day. The priest wouldn't bury it. The ground wouldn't take it. So they burned the rope and let the rest handle itself. That's just how things are now. You try not to look too hard at footprints. Some go in straight lines. Some circle your hut 3 times before vanishing into a wall. Some look human until the last few steps. No one has mentioned a house that sings either. It's on the edge of the village. Empty. Always empty. But once a week, usually before the rain, someone hears humming from inside. They knock. The humming stops. The door opens an inch. There's never anyone there. No one lives there. And yet the fire's always out. Not cold. Just not there. You made the mistake of looking through the window once. It was dark. Then it wasn't. Then something inside looked back at you. You don't go near that house anymore. You don't talk about it. You don't even think about it, unless it thinks about you first. There's also a man in your village who doesn't blink. No one remembers when he arrived. He doesn't age. He doesn't eat. He just sits every day on the same log, carving shapes into stone. He doesn't sell them. He doesn't speak. Sometimes the shapes glow. The priest says to ignore him. The others agree. But everyone leaves bread on his porch once a month. Just in case. You stopped asking questions about time weeks ago. The sun hasn't shown itself in months. The sky bleeds shades of grey that never change. Night is black. Day is darker grey. Seasons have dissolved into a single wet ache. Calendars are pointless. Your body is your calendar now. Teeth aching? Must be the coldest week. Sores healing slower? It's plague season? Crows moving north? Something is about to happen. The absurdity isn't even absurd anymore. It's structured, reliable. You write it into your schedule. You know which days the well smells like copper. You know when the bread screams a little before it cools. You know which hours the crows imitate babies crying. You don't talk about that either. Because if you say these things out loud, they become real. And if they become real, then you're responsible. So you deny. You forget. You call horror by its nickname. You turn absurdity into weather. And that somehow keeps you alive. You used to think the worst thing about 536 was the cold. But it's not. It's the way reality no longer argues with you. It just nods, and then does something worse. At some point, your world stopped following rules. Not loudly, quietly. Like a table that keeps adding legs when you're not looking. Like a fire that goes cold while still burning blue. You once saw a chicken blink sideways. Not strange on its own, until it started mimicking your cough. The priest said it was blasphemy. You said nothing. Next day it was gone. No feathers, no blood. Just a single wet footprint. Too large. Too human. The sky plays tricks now. Some mornings it stares back. You can feel it. Pressure behind the clouds. Like a lid too tight on a pot. Not sunlight. Never sunlight. Just something waiting. People have stopped trying to name what they see. A figure behind the trees. A shape standing in the field at dawn. A bird that isn't flying, just floating, like it's hung from a string you can't see. You asked someone once if they saw it too. They said, "I don't see things that see back." That was the end of that conversation. You've learned the new language of fear. Silence that lasts too long after a question. Laughter that starts too fast and ends too slow. People saying, "It's fine," with their hands shaking under the table. The forest has changed, not grown, changed. You've walked the same path your whole life. But now the trees lean in, like they're listening. The wind doesn't rustle anymore. It hisses. You don't go past the creek. Everyone agrees without saying it. Even the dogs won't cross it. Even the moss grows backward there. Once, someone tried. A traveller. New boots. Straight back. Said he was going to map the region. He laughed when you warned him. He crossed the creek just after noon. By sundown, he was back. Or something wearing him was back. It had his shape, his voice, but not his eyes. It asked questions no one understood. About measurements, about bones, about what dreams feel like when wet. Then it left. No one followed. No one mentioned it again. Even your tools don't behave anymore. A hammer that won't strike the same place twice. A knife that grows colder the longer you hold it. A door that opens outward when it used to open in. You fix things and they unfix themselves by morning. The thatch on your roof comes undone in symmetrical patterns. You tie knots, they untie at night. The chickens nest in circles now. Perfect mathematical spirals. You know someone who's been counting. They say the patterns repeat every 29 days. You ask, "So what happens on the 30th? They don't answer. They just hand you a pouch of salt and tell you to stop dreaming near open windows. Dreams are a problem now. They no longer stay in your head. You wake with bruises from falling off cliffs you never saw. You taste metal for hours after a dream of biting coins. You hear singing in your ears long after the melody fades, sometimes in Latin, sometimes in nothing. You try not to sleep alone anymore, not for comfort, for proof. So someone else can see what walked past the threshold at 3 a.m. So someone else can confirm the shapes on the ceiling weren't yours. You asked the priest about it once. He said, "The mind is the devil's last orchard." Then he handed you oil, ash, and a bell. Told you to hang the bell inside your chest if you could figure out how. You said nothing. You haven't looked at your reflection since. Reflections are unpredictable now. Sometimes they lag. Sometimes they blink wrong. Sometimes they look too relieved to see you. And sometimes there's more than one. Mirrors have become folk tales. The old woman who brushed her hair and watched her reflection smile with too many teeth. The boy who reached into water and pulled back a hand he didn't recognise. The farmer who caught his shadow walking off without him. He never farmed again. Now he just hums to his shovel. Even food misbehaves. You've seen stew steam in the wrong direction. Bread that bleeds when torn. A turnip that blinked. You still eat it. Because hunger is stronger than fear, until it isn't. There are rules now. New ones. You collect them slowly, painfully, like sharp stones in your shoe. Don't open doors after midnight. Don't whistle when it rains. Don't speak your name into mirrors. Don't count your teeth. Don't respond when something knocks twice and says it's you. Everyone knows these rules. No one agrees who made them. They just keep you alive. Probably. And yes, there's still laughter. But it's changed. Not joy. Not even madness. Just a release valve. A pressure hiss. You laugh when the dirt pulses under your feet. You laugh when the sky flickers like a dying candle. You laugh when the birds start repeating your name. Because if you don't laugh, you'll ask questions. and asking questions is how you lose your place in this world. There is a kind of sanity in accepting the absurd. It keeps you upright. It keeps you dull. It keeps you safe. Mostly. Because the horror in 5 and 36 isn't the blood. It's not the cold. It's not the missing sun. It's the idea that this is the new pattern. That the world is rearranging itself without telling you. That you're now part of a story that doesn't care if you understand it. A story with no moral. Just chapters. And yours isn't done yet. You start keeping secrets from yourself. Little ones at first. I didn't hear that. That shadow was just wind. The earth doesn't breathe. But the longer you live here, if you can call this living, the more truth feels like a trap. Knowing too much is dangerous. Not knowing is protection. And forgetting is freedom. You used to pray. Now you whisper to the corners. Not with words, with tone. Low, careful, sympathetic. Like you're trying not to upset the house. Because the house remembers. It creaks when you lie. It shudders when you think of leaving. It settles differently depending on your guilt. Your floorboards groan like old teeth. Sometimes you groan back. The absurdity here is structured. It has routines. It has rhythm. It has etiquette. When you hear weeping through the thatch wall, you don't ask who it is. You match the rhythm. 3 sobs. Pause, 1 exhale. Tap the wall gently twice. Wait. If it responds, you go back to bed. If it doesn't, you light a candle, and you don't sleep that night. Animals know more than you do. They won't go near the church on Wednesdays. The cat avoids mirrors. The cow moans when someone is about to die, but only if they're hiding it. Once a rat dragged a nail into your bed, you thanked it. A man once claimed he saw colour in the sky again. Not just grey, not black, not ash, colour. He described it for hours. Blue, he said. A blue so deep it felt like water. Green like moss on stone. And red like memory. You didn't believe him. Not because it was impossible, but because you couldn't handle hope. Hope hurts more than fear here. Fear is familiar. Fear is furniture. Hope is sharp. Thin. Unreliable. So when he kept talking, they stopped him. Not violently. Not cruelly. They just stopped feeding him. And the next time you saw him, he was quiet, staring at the floor, holding a feather. There are places you don't go anymore. The old barn, where the doors are always open but the inside is always locked. The frozen pond, where the ice has been cracking in the same pattern for months. The graveyard, where something hums beneath the soil when you walk too slow. And the well. Always the well. It still gives water, but sometimes it gives voices too. You fetched a bucket once and heard your name before the rope tightened. Not in your language, not in any language, just your name. The sound of it, folded and broken and still right somehow. You haven't used that well since. You don't go near it. But sometimes, when it rains, you swear you hear it calling others. Children are born different now. Too quiet. Or too loud. Or never blinking. One was born without a shadow. You all took turns watching her, just to see what she would do. She never cried, never smiled. She just stared at the fire, like she recognised it. She died at 6 months. No illness, no injury, just expired. They burned everything she touched, even the floor. A woman nearby has started speaking backwards. She swears it's not her doing it, that the words flip as they leave her mouth, that her thoughts are fine. She says this while spitting out syllables that sound like mirrors shattering. The priest tied a bell to her ankle, said it would warn the others if she changed shape. She still tends the goats. There's a bird that watches you sleep. You've only seen it twice. But both times, you woke with a start and it was perched on your sill. Too still. Feathers wrong. Too neat. Too dry. Eyes like buttons that had read books. You tried to scare it once. It didn't move, just blinked sideways and tilted its head. You haven't seen it again, but you still leave crumbs and say thank you. Some nights the village hums, low, unified, like it's remembering something together. You join in, not because you understand, but because it feels worse to be left out. The absurdity isn't the horror now. It's the structure, the reliability, the way the madness makes sense. The dog howls at 2 a.m. The house creaks at 3. The window fogs at 4, even if it's warm. These things happen, always. You plan around them. You're not scared of the dark anymore. You're scared of the things that wait until light returns, because they've grown patient. You've seen footsteps appear in snow that hasn't fallen yet. You've seen fruit rot before you picked it. You've seen someone cry before hearing bad news. The world isn't just sick. It's recursive. It's playing you back in slow, broken loops. You forget your own voice sometimes. You mouth words before speaking to check if they belong to you. And always, always there's the knocking. Not loud, not regular, not from any direction you can name. Sometimes it's inside the wall. Sometimes it's under your bed. Sometimes it's beneath your skin. A pulse that doesn't match your heart. You knock back. 3 times. Softly. If it knocks again, you apologise. Out loud, just in case. That's not fear. That's etiquette. Because in 536, horror isn't the stranger in your house. It's the house itself asking for attention. And absurdity isn't a break in the pattern. It's the pattern now. At some point, you stop reacting. Not because things are better. They aren't. Not because they're clearer. They never were. But because your body runs out of verbs. You've flinched too many times. You've prayed too many prayers. You've cried until salt tastes normal. Now, you just float. Through the cold, through the hunger, through the dark, through the rituals, the half-beliefs, the cracked bells and the moaning soil, through the knock that comes each night and the breath that isn't yours. You float, still, grey, functioning like a tool that doesn't care if it's used. There's a quiet inside you now. Not peace. Peace is too warm. This is silence made of ash and time. A flatness. You watch people disappear, and your only thought is, I hope they found a better dark. You go entire days without speaking. Not in protest, just because you forget. Words feel too big now. They echo in your mouth like strangers trying to find a way out. So you nod, you shrug, you make the occasional sound like a tired door. Even your thoughts have softened. They don't arrive in sentences, just images. A hand, a crack in the wall, the face of someone who might have been your sister. You used to mark time by seasons, then by sun, then by sky. Now you mark time by collapse. When the last chicken stopped laying eggs. When the boy with frostbitten fingers stopped screaming. When the bread stopped rising. When your neighbour stopped showing up for mass. When no one asked why. Your emotions go through a quiet extinction. Joy goes first, it always does. Then fear, replaced by routine. Then grief, swallowed by necessity. You still feel something when you see movement in the trees. But it's not panic, it's recognition. You start to suspect that the world is not punishing you, just ignoring you. That all this suffering is not divine judgment, but background noise in a story that never intended to include you. And somehow, that's worse. Because pain you earn, pain you understand, that has shape. But pain without reason, that's just erosion. Even memories betray you now. They come loose at the edges. Faces blur. Voices fade. You remember holding a child once? Yours? Someone else's? A dream? You remember your name, but it doesn't taste right. You try saying it aloud. It sounds like something you borrowed. Something not meant to last. You forget why you started praying. You forget when you last slept without waking to something pressing on your chest. You forget who you used to be afraid of. The sky, the woods, yourself. It doesn't matter. You've become your own ghost, not dead, not alive, just adjacent, lingering near your own body, waiting to be invited back in. And still, the village moves. The priest still rings the bell. The birds still fly in circles. The fire still flickers green every 7th night. Everything persists. Not with purpose, but with inertia. Nothing knows how to stop, including you. You've stopped hoping for an end. Not because you don't want one, but because endings require change, and change requires energy. All you have left is endurance, not strength, not resilience, just delay. Survival as deferral. Survival as repetition. The children here don't cry like they used to. Their tears are quieter now, more curious than sad. They ask strange questions. Why doesn't the moon blink? Are shadows older than people? What colour was the sky when God was born? You don't answer. You don't even pretend to try. You just look at them and think, they'll forget they asked soon enough. That's how it works. Questions fade. Then memory. Then the part of you that cared what the answer might have been. You begin to speak less, not just to others, but to yourself. Your internal voice, once full of running commentary and half-formed opinions, goes quiet. Now it just mutters. Eat, move, sleep, repeat. You stop naming things. The man who walks bent over is no longer Marcus. He's the hunched one. The woman who weaves by the fire is just her. The woods are the place. Even your own body becomes this leg, this arm, this pain. Names feel too heavy. They imply ownership, identity, permanence, none of which apply anymore. You have become temporary, even to yourself. You used to dream of escape, running to another village, finding the sea, starting fresh. But fresh implies clean, and nothing is clean here. Even your dreams are muddy. They smell like mould and forgotten prayers. So now you don't dream of escape. You dream of nothing. Of quiet that lasts. Of being allowed to stop. Not die, just stop. To lay down without needing to wake. To breathe out once and let that be enough. You don't want heaven. You don't want salvation. You just want stillness. A moment unburdened by cold or hunger or memory. Just one. That would be enough. But the year won't give it to you. It demands your motion. It feeds on your drag. Even now, your bones ache just enough to keep you moving. And so you move. Not toward anything. Not away. Just forwards. Into whatever version of yourself is waiting tomorrow. If there is one. The worst part isn't the pain. It's that you've made room for it. It used to feel like something crashing into you. Unexpected, sharp, wild. Now it's furniture. Not comfortable, but familiar. A chair you never liked, but that your back has memorized. You sit in it without noticing. You used to count pain in moments. Now you measure it in versions of yourself. The version that still fought the cold. The version that still questioned the sky. The version that cried when they died. All gone. What's left is the version that makes tea without tasting it. The version that flinches, not from fear, but memory. The version that watches frost creep across the wall and thinks, yes, that's how a thought should move. Even mourning has changed. It used to be an event, a breaking. Now it's ambient, an atmosphere. You mourn without needing a trigger. You just do. A bowl breaks, and there it is. A crow lands crooked on a roof beam, and there it is. You see a child humming the same 4-note tune for an hour, and there it is. Grief with no story, only texture. You learn to keep it inside like breath, held quiet, heavy enough to feel, but not so much that it leaks, because leaking is dangerous here. Emotion makes you visible. You've seen what happens when someone cracks, how the room shifts, how people back away, how the silence gets sharper, like it's waiting for permission to take something. No one wants to be around someone who's too awake. Awake people attract attention. Not from the priest, not from the village, from the other thing. The thing that notices movement. The thing that sees colour in cheeks. The thing that listens for breathing that's too deep. So you dim yourself, not to survive, to stay boring. Because in 536, safety lies in mediocrity. You want to be unmemorable. You want to blend into the fog, into the dust, into the rhythm. No one hurts wallpaper. No one follows furniture. You become a fixture in your own life. Still, sometimes something slips. A moment, a flash, a sound that shouldn't be there. You find yourself humming, and stop, horrified. You smile at a joke someone didn't mean, and the smile won't come off. You dream of sunlight, and wake up angry that you let yourself believe. Because emotion now is betrayal of yourself, of your numbness, of the walls you've built to stay contained. So you punish yourself, not with harm, with withdrawal. You stop speaking to the man who gave you mushrooms last spring. You stop going to the clearing where birds used to nest. You stop touching the necklace your mother gave you, because it reminds you she once had a name. You erase things. Not because they're bad, because they make you feel. And feeling is too expensive. Some people in the village still try. They paint symbols on doors. They tell stories to children. They plant seeds in frozen soil. You watch them with awe, not admiration. Awe like you'd watch someone walk into the sea with pockets full of rocks, convinced they'll float. You don't stop them, but you don't join them. You've learned what hope does, how it curls back on itself, how it sharpens when it dies. Hope is not the enemy, it's the bait. You focus on maintenance now, of routines, of numbness, of your body. You eat, not because you're hungry. You stopped feeling that 3 months ago. But because the priest says the soul needs sustenance to stay bound to flesh. You bathe when you can, not for hygiene, but to feel the outline of your skin. To remember you have one. You stretch your hands each morning, not for warmth, to check if your fingers still respond. You keep a scrap of wool inside your shirt, not for insulation, to prove that some textures still feel different. These small acts aren't rituals, they're tests. You're not praying, you're confirming. Still here, still solid, still tethered. And when that fails, you go still. You sit in corners. You stand in fields. You press your back to a wall and let your breath go shallow, as if trying to match the pulse of stone. You want to disappear, but only enough to not draw notice. You want to dissolve just around the edges, to become fog-shaped, to be mistaken for smoke. Because if you're nothing in particular, maybe the year will forget to punish you. That's the goal now. Not joy, not redemption, just avoidance. Avoid the sickness. Avoid the dreams. Avoid the eye in the sky that never quite blinks. Avoid being the next. You've seen the signs before someone breaks. A glint in the eye. A twitch in the hands. A pause before answering questions that don't deserve thought. You've learned to look away. To walk faster. To pretend you didn't see. Because if you see it, it might see you. That's the rule now. And no one breaks the rules. Not anymore. The last man who broke one just stared at the moon for too long. Didn't blink, didn't breathe, just stared. Until the moon blinked back. They found him the next day sitting in the ashes of his home, smiling like someone told him a joke he finally understood. He didn't speak after that, just laughed when people passed. No one asked what he saw. No one wanted to know. Because some knowledge peels. Some truth cuts from the inside out. And you have grown too practiced in holding your own seams together. You no longer look for light, not even in memory. It used to be a habit. Picturing the sun. Recalling it on purpose to stay tethered. Now, you don't bother. Even imagined warmth makes you shiver. You've learned how to navigate without brightness. Not with torches, with proximity. You don't walk toward what's visible anymore. You walk toward what isn't shifting. What doesn't hum. What doesn't know your name. You've developed instincts. Or maybe symptoms. A new sensitivity to patterns that shouldn't repeat. A sixth sense for places where the silence feels crowded. A gut reaction to voices that come from too far inside someone's throat. You don't speak of these things. No one does. Instead, you trade glances. Nods. Weighted silence like sandbags on the soul. The church still holds service. Not because people believe, that's long since faded, but because it's the only time anyone pretends they're still part of something. They kneel. They murmur. They mimic the old postures, like dancers repeating a funeral. But no one asks for salvation anymore. They ask for predictability. For nothing new. For one more day without the absurd reordering itself again. You don't cry anymore. Not because you're strong, because you're dry. Your grief is brittle now. It cracks instead of flows. Sometimes you laugh when you shouldn't, not loudly. Just a single breath that escapes sideways, like a cough that gave up. You wake in the middle of the night and stare at nothing. Not because something woke you, just because you forgot how to stay unconscious. You don't dream much now. And when you do, the dreams are still. Not nightmares, just spaces. Cold rooms. Endless corridors. Snow falling indoors. A cup that refills with ash. You wake from these dreams feeling almost refreshed. Because for once, they didn't ask anything of you. No more lessons. No more omens. No more symbols clawing at your mind. Just quiet. Real or not, you don't care. You've stopped checking for meaning. You used to look for symbols in everything. Bird flight, cloud shape, knocks on wood, the way your bread's split. Now, you just eat. Just walk. Just breathe. The world can keep its riddles. You're not solving anything anymore. Perspective has shifted. Not grown. Shrunk. You no longer think about the future. The future is too large. Too sharp. Instead you think in increments. The next fire. The next breath. The next time the door creaks without wind. That's all you can afford. Your past has become fictional. Not gone, but irrelevant. It feels like someone else's life. You remember your first steps, your first hunger, your first prayer? But they come to you like stories you once heard, not things you lived. Your identity has thinned. You no longer think of yourself as I, just this person, this place, this task. You no longer resist the weather. You let it in. Let it chill your bones. Let it soak your shoes. Let it remind you that the world outside still exists, even if you no longer belong to it. And deep down, something in you is relieved. Relieved that the fight is over. Relieved that no one expects anything more from you. Relieved that all that's left is waiting. You used to imagine escape. Then you imagined death. Now you imagine stillness. To become a rock beside the well. A shadow that doesn't move. An idea too small to haunt. You no longer crave answers. Not to where the sun went. Not to what lives in the woods. Not to what's under the church or behind the knock. You don't want to know. You just want the world to stop asking. You envy trees now. They don't believe. They don't mourn. They don't need to know what's coming. They just exist. Rooted. Numb. Silent. You find yourself mimicking them, standing still longer, blinking slower, breathing less. You imagine being buried upright like a tree. Watching without watching. Waiting without wanting. And somehow, that thought doesn't frighten you. It calms you. Because in this year, in this dust-covered, sunless forgetting, the only true perspective left is this. You're not meant to survive. You're meant to dissolve. Into routine, into weather, into background, into nothing. And maybe, if you're very quiet, the year will pass over you thinking you were never here at all. No conclusions, no lessons, just breath. The world is still turning, not faster, not slower, just farther. Farther from what it was, farther from what you remember, farther from you. The wind still speaks, if you're quiet enough. But its words are no longer meant for ears. Only for stone, only for root, only for the things that never needed light. You lie still now, not hiding, not waiting, just still. There is no need to count anymore, no need to fear the knock, or the creak, or the hum. It will all happen again, and again, and again. Not to punish you, not to test you, just because that's what the dark does. It repeats. And maybe tonight you're allowed to drift. No thoughts, no names, no sky. Just the soft hush of breath leaving your body, and the colder hush that never returns it. Sleep now, the year doesn't care. And that, finally, is peace.